Our Rats with Team 45 League, analyzing the game between Brown Deer and Iowa Archer. This was played in Team Event 53 in the 4th round. Let's have a look. And I'm happy to see a game of between a couple players at the lower end of the rating scale. Players down here can still play good games, and they both, for the most part, do play a reasonable game here. One thing I point out in my lesson program in the first one is that depending on what rating range you're at, you're going to make a certain amount of mistakes. It's been estimated that a player of a 1600 rating, half his moves will not be the best choices. Very few of these will be gross blunders, but they'll often be a series of 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th best moves instead of finding the absolute correct move. Whereas at the top end of the spectrum, a grandmaster will make 1 or 2 tiny errors in an entire game. And the objective that my lesson program points out is that if we can identify your mistakes and correct them, then what's going to happen is you're going to be losing fewer games. And as a result of that, your rating goes up. And in Team 45 League, you tend to play people with close to your rating. So if, say, these players, take Brown Deer for instance, 1486, if he can get his rating up to 1650, he's going to have to graduate to the next group of sections and be playing other people rated around 1650. And even if they're better than he's going to learn a lot just by playing against these better players, because he'll start understanding the things that they're doing. And essentially this is how you progress through the system. If you're trying to say attain the rank of master 2200, you just get experience from playing better players, and you will learn when you play them. So what I try to do in these videos, as always, is suggest alternative lines of play. When I see a mistake, I'll try to give you another plan and get you to put your thinking cap on, because I can't show you all the stuff. You as I say again and again, I can just get you started. I can show you a few things to look at and a few things to consider, and next time you go to play a game, you take some of these things at their face value and attempt to do a little better. Okay, so E6, this is perfectly good. It's the Scheveningen system. And White has many choices here, one of which is G4, the carries attack, but we won't go into all that. You guys can look them up. They're in the book. Okay, again, I can't show everything. A lot of your improvement, if you're trying to improve, has to come from the work you put in. I can just shortcut it and show you ideas that you can go look up. And a lot of it comes from analyzing your own games. Now, normally in a Scheveningen, that knight goes to C6, but it's okay on D7. Okay, and the setup is here reasonable. Now, this is an interesting 9th move by White's F3, and I'm not criticizing it at all, but I'm going to explain a little bit. This is a move that I used to play in similar type positions when I was lower rated, around 1600, and it's generally not the best move, but it's definitely not a mistake. Okay, let me explain why it's not the best move. Okay, ideally what White would like to do at some point is, here I'll just show you, I call these fantasy lines. They're not forced, they're not the only line, it's just an alternative plan of action. Okay, White wants to get the bishop to F3, and there's certain reasons for wanting this. For instance, if some point B5 comes in, White gets a little tactical shot of E5 that Black has to watch out for. And the bishop has a little better scope than being shut in by the pawns when it's sitting on E2 and there's a pawn on F3. Now, Black has remedies here. It's not set in stone that White's going to be crushing Black here. Some of the plans are for Black to at some point get E5 in. What this does is it stops the E5 thrust, and it opens up whole different opportunities which are beyond the scope of this video. So let's just go back. But it's a move I would often play and had mixed results with it. As I said, and we'll see one of those things that Black could have striven for here in a little bit. Okay, so castling is okay here. Now Queen E1. Now what White is trying to do now, this is done in Scheveningen style, is Queen G3, and Black's going to attempt to try to checkmate White and get some kind of an attack going. And here's the point where I think that Black just didn't quite understand what he should be striving for here, and I'm going to stop and show it. Now, let me just back it up. What Black should shoot for here is to play D5. Now, I can't do it right now. He's got to prepare it. And I will just again come up with a sample line to show what black can strive for here. Okay, the key move is to play knight b6. Now you're eyeballing getting d5 in. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to play a couple sample moves, and you'll see where this is going. Okay, now it might be too early to play d5 because of e5. So let's just make a little preventative maintenance move. Queen c7. That will stop white from playing e5. Now, or white stop black from playing bishop f4 because of e5. Now I'm going to tuck the king in the corner, and there's a reason for that. Now black gets his freeing move, d5. Okay, now e5 is out of the question. So, if anything, black is threatening to take on e4 and give white an isolated e-pawn. So let's suppose white takes. Now, the knight on b6 is the correct knight to recapture with. Keep the knight on f6 for now, over there by the king side. Now, black is threatening to mess up the pawn structure on white's queen side, so logically white will take, and then black will retake, and then now we see the point of king h1 not only break any pins and take away possible checks, it provided a haven for the bishop, and the bishop is fine right there. Okay, now what's happened here? White has a 3-on-2 majority, black has a 4-on-3 majority of pawns. But at the same time, black has freed his game. He's going to be getting his light-squared bishop developed in a moment. There's a potential threat looming on c2 if the knight on d4 is driven away. And it's safe to say that black has achieved equality here. White doesn't really have any kind of an effective demonstration going on for a kingside attack. So black has equalized and achieved his aim. So let's go back and see what knight c5 does. One thing it does do, in a way, it takes away from white playing f4 because e4 hangs, and it might be something eventually white does want to play with the idea of getting the bishop to f3 as I showed earlier, but the drawback is white has lost the tempo doing so. And anyway, white plays rook d1. And e5's a very interesting move, and I think it led to some good play by black that he didn't see, and I'll show that in a moment. It's true black has a backward d-pawn on the open file, but how many Sicilian defenses do we see where this happens? Even with a hole on d5, it happens quite a lot, and theory has proven that black can survive this. And I'm going to show you what black did. I think I considered a double error. I'll show you the continuation here, but I think black missed a better line of continuation. Now, when I say a double error, I think that move was a mistake just to take here, and I'll come back to it. And I believe white should probably take with the a pawn, but he did the unusual thing of taking with the c pawn, and this has pluses and minuses to it. The first minus is just picture a king and pawn ending. Take away all the knights, bishops, rooks, and queens. Take them all off the board. Well, black wins this because he has a pawn majority on one side of the board. And white cannot create a pass pawn on the queen side. This is similar to the Ruy-Lopez exchange variation in some respects. After white takes on c6 and black recaptures with his d-pawn, if you eliminate all the back rank pieces except for the kings, white wins, simply because he will eventually create a pass pawn on the king side and black will not create one on the queen side. That's basically the logic. I think you have to throw d4 in and make some exchanges on d4, but anyway, black should be okay here too, but I have a better plan for black here, and I want to show it. Although there was nothing wrong with taking on b3, and it doesn't give black a worse game, knight e6 is a really good move here in this position for a lot of reasons. Okay, first off, the knight keeps the bishop out of g5. I'm not saying white wants to do that, but it does keep that possibility out. This knight also has influence over a couple of key squares in the white camp, f4 and d4, and it's going to restrain white from playing f4 on his own, which might be necessary to do a kingside attack. And another thing that this does is black is carefully preparing to get d5 in, and we're going to get to that in a little bit. But let me just back up and get rid of these arrows because I want to show some arrows from circles for white. Whoops, Went too far. Okay. Knight e6. Okay. Now, by not exchanging that knight, let's consider this knight for a moment. What is its future? Does it have one? Well, ideally, it'd like to get to b6, and the quickest route there is stopped right now. You know, knight a5 to c4 to b6. The problem on a5 is it's hanging, so it's not clear how white's going to get it into a5. But it's not able to get to c5 because there's a pawn in the way. Well, it could, I guess. There's a pin, but knight c5, then we just take it anyway. But black should be fine with that. It can't get to d4, and if it goes to c1, where's it going next? It's not going to e2. There's a bishop in the way. If it goes to d2, it's certainly not going to e4 or f3, and there's a rook in the way on f1. So this knight's going to have a hard time getting back in the game. And just for the sake of argument, let's just go ahead and show knight c5. Black can gain some time for development here. Just take it, okay? And now, let's develop the queen with a threat, okay? Now the threat is queen takes bishop, and white has to stop and deal with that. Let's bring the bishop back to f2. And in this case, black can just go ahead and play bishop e6 here, and he should be fine. White has to think twice about playing knight d5 at any given point, because c2 could be hanging, and black will then play rook fd8, rook ac8, and prepare b5 and d5, and black is sitting okay here. So let's go back to the position and go on what happened. Okay, b5 is good. He could have considered bishop e6. That's something for the players to look at on their own and see what that could do, because strategically what black should be aiming for is to get d5 in and eliminate that backward pawn, and he should be able to do it. Now if white takes with the pawn, then the black bishop goes to f5, and it's got a great diagonal, and it's very active. But anyway, now, and I guess it's right here that black makes a mistake, and which could have cost him the game. And here it is, d5, and I guess the culprit here is white is going to be moving too quick. Let's take a look. He did spend over a minute on that move, but black has stepped into a pin, and before, let me just look at the clock. Okay, he basically spent about a minute on that move because his clock only went down a little bit. But white to play and do the best he can. Stop the video, see what you can come up with. Okay, all right, you've resumed. Now the problem is that black has here in defending this position is his bishop is pinned against his queen, and as long as white has that rook on d1, it's going to stay pinned, and it's not clear how black supports that bishop. What he would like to do is play rook a7 and rook d7, but he can't because white has a bishop on e3, which is hitting a7. So from this position right here, white can win with rook d3. And let me just show you what happens. The basic threat is to play queen d2 and leave the and win that bishop. Now what can black do in the meantime? He needs another defender of that piece, and his queen can't go anywhere where it can still protect the bishop and break the pin. Okay, so the best black can try is rook c8. The other pieces don't help, and then white just pins it. Now it's doubly attacked. So then black plays a little tricky move, bishop c5, and this has a pitfall that white could accidentally fall into. If he gets greedy and plays rook takes d5, black wins with bishop takes e3 check, and now the queen is overworked. It's got to take the bishop, because otherwise the queen is lost, getting out of check, and that ends up hanging the rook on d5. But white doesn't have to be greedy. White can just carefully take on c5, and now black's got a defender of his bishop. However, white has another good move, b4, and black needs to move his rook, and he's out of tricks, and then the bishop on d5 falls, and white wins. So black allowed a win, and white played too quickly and didn't see it. You know, how many times do I have to say in these videos? Slow down, guys. All right. he played here after just, like I say, about a minute thought. He had plenty of time to just say, hey, look, I've got a pin. We all know what pins are, right? I've got a pin. What can I do to make that pin better? What's he thinking of? Is he, I try to get inside you guys' mind and say, well, it's attacking h7. Maybe the plan is to pin it by bishop e4, but black has time to break the pin now and get out of that. Maybe he thinks of, like, for instance, if queen c7, I'll take the h7 pawn with check and then pick up the bishop. Well, that's only winning a pawn. You can win a piece, right? Obviously, the queen's not going to h4 to threaten mate because h4 is covered. So let's see how black responds. He responds with f5. And now it's not exactly clear how white progresses, but at some point I remember there was a bishop takes d5 or b5 trick in here, renewing all the threats and that white missed. And I think it's coming up here now, rook c8. And I think if just bishop takes b5, white wins again. Okay, what does black do? If he ignores the bishop and lets it sit there, he could drop the a6 pawn as well, right? And that's going to lead to a lost game. So, and if he takes the bishop, then white just comes down here and takes the pawn, and even though white's a piece down, that bishop on d5 is a goner. And I don't see what white can do to, or what black can do to stop it. Bishop c6 just runs into queen c4 check, and then followed by most likely rook takes queen. So white had another chance and he didn't see it. At least black's taking his time. He's trying. But here, white did spend some time on the position and didn't see it. So it's just maybe one of these thinking deficiencies. We don't consider some sacrifices. We say, well, we can't play bishop takes pawn because he just takes the piece. But we don't think beyond the box and say, well, by taking on b5, we create a counterplay on the bishop on d5. So sometimes you have to examine moves you wouldn't normally play. Chess is like that, and it happens a lot as you move up in the rating classes. And black's doing a reasonable job here in trying to save things. And this is an interesting move, but I don't think it should have worked either. But white lets it work. At some point here. I just kind of want to run through this so the video doesn't go too long. I've covered most of the main points here about some of the strategies you can use in the Sicilian defense. Now he finds it though, and that's what's curious. But maybe now that he's set it up, he sees that he's got his battery set up on the D file, and now he can do it and get away with it and regain the piece. So sometimes maybe you don't see the pins, but you see the direct brute force approach of having both guys lined up on it. And that's what white visualizes. Now, white is still better here. He's up a pawn, even though his pawn is doubled, but the pawn on b5 is weak, the pawn on e5 is weak, and white is probably winning this. Matter of fact, I will say for sure white is winning this. But unfortunately, what white does is doesn't think. And at this point, what he should have simply played, well, let me show you what he did play. Or you might want to, let me not share anything. White to play and do the best he can, okay? Stop the video. Come on back. All right, you're back. What did you come up with? If you came up with this move, you got it wrong, okay? If you played queen takes e5, you got it right. And the reason queen takes e5 is right is, look at what this move does. Black has a couple of nuisance checks, and that's it. The king can find shelter on g3, and he'll be fine. And even if white picks up a pawn or two with check, okay, or black picks up. Okay, let's just look at it real quick. King up. Yeah, you grab this. Oh, you can't grab that pawn. Okay, so now, like I say, the king comes up here. In effect, black is out of checks. Throwing f4 check just isn't going to help. You're just throwing another pawn away. But white's got a threat of rook takes rook, and at the same time, if black takes on d5, the queen's retaking with check, and the b5 pawn falls, and white's going to go on and win this. So let's revert. if White had played queen takes e5, he would have won. But let's see how much time he took. He had 25 minutes and 47 seconds. And look, 26:12. Okay, his time went up by 25 seconds. That meant he spent 20 seconds on this move. And if you're in this position, you have an 11-minute time advantage over your opponent. So you can sit there for 10 minutes and analyze and still have more time than your opponent. And when you guys are playing, keep this in mind. If your opponent is taking his time, chances are he is playing a little better, but it may not mean anything if you have the advantage, and White clearly has an advantage here. So had White not rushed, he could have considered both moves. And it's really hard, I guess, or it isn't hard, I should say, to just visualize the possibilities. Okay, no matter which one you take, which way you take, whether it's queen takes or rook takes, what are candidate moves for black? What can black do? Okay, I already showed you what the candidate moves are on the correct one, and there's really only one, because rook takes rook check just falls to queen takes and pick up this pawn and start the pawns running. But the only candidate move to examine was queen c1, and then you come up and you can't take this pawn, and I showed you that. So if that candidate move is possible on queen takes, it must also be possible on king takes. On rook takes. And so that's exactly what black does. Check. Now, what's White going to do here? He's got 3 legal moves to get out of check. He can hit, well, more than that, but you don't want to throw away the queen on d1. But if you play king f2, what does black do? It's easy. Rook d2, pinning the queen. And if White retreats his queen, then rook d1 pins it. So let's try this, okay? Bang. And putting the rook on e1 doesn't help, you just renew it. Right? Renew the pin. Okay, so what's White do? Well, he did his best. He brought the queen here, and now it's pinned, and all White can do is just try to keep giving check and hopefully get a draw. Let's see what happens, because he's definitely clearly losing his queen. So it's interesting to see how it plays out, and these things aren't hard to analyze out. And like I say, had White spent more than 20 seconds on that impulsive move, he would have won the game, but he didn't. Okay, so we get a check, and black tries to run for the hills. Now he's covered most of the checks. Okay, he could have gone to h5. That might have been better, but it doesn't really matter the way it turns out. You'll see. And, White gets to keep checking, but he only has so many checks. And here black discovers that he has to repeat the position, and White's probably hoping for a draw. But black stopped and thought and said, gee, I can advance my king instead. If I go back, he'll just get a draw. Let's try going forward. And then comes another check. And once the black king gets here, White's in trouble. He's run out of checks. He can't check with the queen anywhere except for f1. That's the only legal check, and that just walks into a fast checkmate. So White tried one more check, but unfortunately black gets this check in, and White's quite lost here. He doesn't even have a stalemate idea. I mean, king h2, his king is stalemated if, well, it's not stalemated. No, it isn't. But it's mate quick here. So as you can see on the board, White resigned after queen e3 check. So there was a lot here, and overall both sides played reasonably well. There were just a few little mistakes. Black miscalculated with his d5 push, wasn't prepared well, and White missed the tactics to take advantage of the pin. And then White obviously a couple times made some fast moves which cost him the game. So eliminate these mistakes, and you guys, you'll do better. Your play is fine. You understand the game. No shame in losing. You're trying to get better. You will. And I thank everyone for their time and having a look, and we'll see you with the next video soon. Take care.